Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtuo Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your Virtuo Pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
Empower. Tim collects bobbleheads. A lot of bobbleheads. Baseball bobbleheads, race car bobbleheads, little chihuahua bobbleheads. He's got an entire room strictly for bobbleheads. Does he need them? No. Is his wife mad about it? A little. But Tim works with Empower, and he got good at money, so he can be a little bad. Ooh, horse bobblehead. Classy, Tim. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Got some good news for your ears. More of that good stuff is coming up. And even better news for your hair. The best hair care is at Sephora. They've got all kinds of products for every kind of hair. From brands like Amika, Kerastase, Day, and K18. You knew where to get great audio. Now, you know where to get great hair care too. Sephora. Good news for great hair. Shop hair care now at Sephora.com.
Danger, old chap, danger! Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, and our very special Best in the West General Series, teeing you up to We Have Ways Fest at the 12th to 14th of September. What we thought we'd do for you is a series of episodes where, in a completely fair and unbiased and impartial manner, is lay out for you who we think the best generals in the West are amongst. First of all, we're going to do, in this episode, we'll be doing Duke Generals, so Dominion's UK Empire.
We're doing 2 episodes on this,
and we're doing 2 episodes on Duke, and then we'll be doing 2 episodes on our American friends, and then, of course, 2 episodes on the other side of the hill.
But what about the Italians and the French?
Well, which side are the French on in this instance, Jim? Because let's not forget, they did bat for both teams, so to speak.
When I was doing some notes, I put down Axis, and I suddenly thought, well, that's interesting, isn't it? He's like Dolan. I mean, I know he's an admiral, so he's off. So just to keep it simple, this is Duke, American, German. We're not bothering with General Messe, who's the only one who could sort of reasonably be considered, I think.
Yeah, and what we've got is we've got a load of names for you in each of these 3 pairs. We're going to sort of kick the ball around talking about the people concerned and look at them, and there'll be one or two names you will have definitely heard, especially if you're a regular listener to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. And there'll be 1 or 2 names that maybe I hadn't thought about considering them in the pantheon of khaki greats.
Yep.
So it's khaki greats, then it's olive drab greats, and then it's the old Feldgrau greats. And and obviously there might be a lot of booing and hissing during the German generals, but there might be quite a lot of booing and hissing during some of this, because after all, this is one of those topics that is, contentious is the wrong word.
Divisive.
Yeah, not Nicola Sturgeon divisive. It's the thing people like to argue about, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, they really do.
They do like to argue about it. And often the historiography sort of flow of the argument comes from post-war national ideas, and but also during the war.
Yes, and it also definitely comes from post-war, where, and the narrative of the war, historiography of the war, there becomes trends on someone's in, someone's out.
Yeah.
But obviously we're completely impartial, and that's the most important thing.
And also, if someone's not on the list, that is a judgment in itself. But the great thing about this is we want you to take part. So we're going to have these 6 episodes where we talk about this Best in the West idea. And this is basically Northwest Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean theatres we're talking about.
It's not the Far East. It's not the Eastern Front.
No.
It's not the Pacific.
No.
So for example, Frank Messervy, he's not in this, but were we to do Best in the East, Best in the Pacific, then obviously he would be on that, even though he was briefly he was in the West, but he was sacked, so it makes it kind of hard to justify him being the best.
That was the first of his headquarters that were overrun during the war. Anyway, Once is unfortunate, twice, old boy. Might seem like carelessness. But
Exactly.
the best thing, the most important thing about this is we want you to take part. So on our Patreon, our We Have Ways of Making You Talk Patreon, is your opportunity to vote on the runners and riders in Best on the West. Whittle them down, if you possibly can, to some people for us to talk about at the festival with various historians who will be coming in prepared and forewarned and forearmed to make the case for their favourite generals and those generals' contribution during the Second World War. And that's what we've got for you, right?
Yep, and we're going to be discussing the lives and careers of 14 in each category. So 14 Duke Generals, 14 American, 14 German. And we're going to kick off, aren't we, with General Sir Ronald Forbes Adam. Perhaps not an obvious one, but an interesting character. 1885 to 1982. Lived to a good old age.
Yep.
Very old age.
Yeah, and Eton. Then at Woolwich, which is interesting. So he's not a Sandhurst man. So he's sort of on the technical side of soldiering, because the Royal Military Academy at Woolwich is gunners, really, in theory.
Joined the Field Artillery in 1905.
I know, isn't that amazing?
Served in India before heading to the Western Front and the Italian Front. So lots and lots of action. Gets the DSO, mentioned in dispatches multiple times, and appointed Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE. He'd already earmarked just by that for between the wars high rank.
But he's one of these people who's been at the Staff College. You know, he's trained there. He's been an instructor, briefly the commandant at the Staff College. So this is a guy who is British Army, pre-First World War, First World War, interwar, through and through. He's Deputy Chief of Imperial General Staff in January 38. So this is a guy destined absolutely for the top. And then, of course, he's CRA in 1st Division in 1936. So he's done lots of important jobs. And as you say, he's a gunner. The thing that's really important about Adam is that he becomes Adjutant General in 1941. And his contribution really to the British war effort is the sort of modernisation and adaptation of the army into a modern citizen soldier army under the pressure of the war as it moves forward. The thing that is really, really interesting is some people regard him as a bit sort of progressive and flip-floppy and lefty. But that's because basically he's thinking, how on earth do I bring the army up to date? How do I democratise officer selection, all these sorts of things, which they know they've got to do because they're chewing through officers so fast. The army aren't necessarily doing that because they read The Guardian. They're doing it because they think, well, we're just going to have to because we've run out of nice public school boys. And so the Wasby War Office Selection Board's really important. General Service Corps, which is...
Yeah, which is based on... It's psychological based. That's how they do it. So it's systematic. It's not about class and background.
Yeah.
It's about intelligence and aptitude.
Exactly. And what he does is the army needs, because the thing about the British Army is that, and if you have regular listened to podcasts, you know about lots of private armies that even during the war, even while Adam is trying to sort of iron things out and standardise things, is that there are lots of private armies and ways of doing things and regiments that have their particular way of doing things. And he basically tries to standardise it because the thing that's coming to him from the generals in the field is they want the men to all be doing the same thing so you can give them the orders, you know what they're going to do next, as it were. And so there's this great big standardisation goes on, and he's really important in terms of the ABCA, the Army Bureau of Current Affairs.
Well, yes, you should just say the first bit is the General Service Corps. This is the GSC, which he brings in 1942, and it's brilliant. And you're right, the ABCA is absolutely fantastic. I've got shelves full of these things. These are notes from the theatres of war, training pamphlet number 42, 43, etc., etc., etc. And this is all part of the Army Bureau of Current Affairs, the ABCA. And it's all about keeping people informed, learning lessons, also about morale.
Yeah. I mean, lots of people won't have heard of him. Plenty will have done. But what he's he is how the army ends out. British Army is basically really chewing through the Germans. He's one of the people that's made that possible. And I think that's why he's in our list. Simple as that.
Yeah, and just one other thing about him. He is the guy who sets up the Dunkirk perimeter. He's 3-Corps commander in 1940 in France, and he sets that up as well and does it very, very well, it has to be said, because 338,000 people get off.
Yeah. So that's Adam.
Don't dismiss him.
No, at all. But next up, and we're doing these purely alphabetically, ladies and gentlemen, but it may feel like James Holland has slightly loaded the dice here, or prepared the wicket. Let's put it that way. He's got his groundsman out in the middle of the night with a very heavy roller, because here comes Field Marshal Sir Harold Alexander.
Well, what a legend. I mean, the thing is, he's just a great man. He just is. He's a man sort of without personal ambition. He's got a sort of profound sense of honour. He is the man who has the only senior commander in the Second World War of any side that has commanded troops at every rank in battle.
Yeah.
He's the only Allied commander to command German troops, which he does when he takes command of the Baltic Landswehr in 1919 in the Baltic Wars. He is unusual in that he's a guardsman who gets sent to the Indian Army.
Yeah, that's pretty weird, isn't it?
Yeah. And he takes command of the Nowshera Brigade in 1934, and he disappears for the first 3 months. No one knows quite where he is every afternoon. And then it comes to the Nowshera Brigade sports day, and he stands up and speaks them all in fluent Urdu. And actually, he can speak 7 languages. Which is very impressive, including German, Italian, Russian, obviously Urdu, smattering of Gurkhali. He's very switched on from that point of view. He sees lots of action in the Low Agra campaign against the Pathans and the Malakand in the second Momand campaign, where he gains a very, very good reputation for leading from the front. He's promoted to Major General in 1937, which makes him at the time the youngest in the army. He's then appointed to command the 1st Infantry Division in 1938, and it's with the 1st Infantry Division that he goes to war in France in 1940. He serves under Brooke, who is the corps commander.
Yep.
And then when most of the senior command disappear off, he is the last senior commander to remain behind. And he oversees the evacuation, and he is the last soldier to leave the beaches, British soldier to leave the beaches on the 2nd of June.
There's lots of accounts that confirm that. That's not just a burnished legend from a superfan. I mean, Alexander is one of those people that you feel like countries don't produce anymore. 7 languages. He's a brilliant sportsman.
At the end of 1914, he gets shot in the First Battle of the Ypres, and he gets wounded in the eye, in the thigh, and the hand. And to prove he's fit again, he walks 64 miles in one day.
It's extraordinary. He's Irish, of course. I think that's the other thing to remember.
He's an Ulsterman.
A lot of the people who get to the top in the British Army are Irish, I think is often worth remembering, or bearing in mind at least.
Yeah, he also sets up the battle schools and new training techniques using live ammunition, simple phrases and all the rest of it, which becomes the basis of training for thereafter. Then he gets sent over to Burma in 1942 to oversee the retreat back across the Irrawaddy of the Burma Corps, and does it brilliantly. And actually, not only does he do that very, very smoothly, he also, in his report and dispatch afterwards, he then recommends how to defeat the Japanese, which is completely ignored by everyone until Slim.
Realises that getting hung up on places is pointless, that you've got to fight them, defeat them, not hold on to places, because what they'll do is go past you. They'll cut you off and leave you to hang is the thing. And he understands that. He must have felt, though, by 1942 that he was just basically being given disasters to sort of midwife.
Well, yes, but then he gets called back and gets appointed GOC of First Army. But then there is this, Auchinleck gets sacked, so he then gets bumped up to Commander-in-Chief of Middle East. And then Monty comes in because Gott, who is going to be the 8th Army commander, gets assassinated. And so then he becomes CNC Middle East. He's the person who says no more retreats. It's not Monty, it's him. He also, at the Battle of Alamein, he suggested a gang gun. He says, you might want to mention to Monty that this line of attack is not the right one. This is Operation Supercharge, second half of the battle. You might want to go this way instead, which Monty then adopts, and with great success. He then, despite being Commander-in-Chief of the Middle East, he then gets promoted to Deputy Supreme Allied Commander from February 1943 onwards. Gets sent to be Army Group Commander in Tunisia. There's a crisis going on in the middle of February, and within about a week, he sorted it all out. And again, creates battle schools in North Africa to retrain green American troops and, frankly, green British troops as well. Then commands 15th Army Group for Operation Husky. And one of his great things is that everyone likes him. So he's very good at coalition warfare, which he then takes into Italy. And at some point, he has 24 different nationalities serving underneath him. And he ends the war as Supreme Allied Commander. And a Field Marshal. And there's this accusation that he doesn't have great strategic insight, but it's really interesting. I've just been reading Saul David's book on Tunisgrad, and, his strategic insight seems pretty impressive to me. I mean, he seems to know exactly what's going on.
Brooke sounds off about him in his diary a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, but Brooke sounds off about everybody in his diary. So don't take that in isolation.
Well, no, but that's the thing people have cherry-picked, isn't it, to bash him with. That Brooke calls him sort of dunderhead with no strategic sense. He's such he calls him thick and things like that. It's very weird.
He is the consummate coalition commander. He's tactful, he's unflappable.
I don't quite believe that a man who ends up a Field Marshal has no ambition, Jim, but there we are.
He has no personal ambition. So English, French, Italian, German, Russian, Urdu, get by on Spanish and Gurkhali. Amazing artist. He's just at the top of British efforts from the success of Alamein through Tunisia, Sicily, and Italy. And he is absolutely one of the most visible and famous British commanders there has ever been, back in 1945. There is not a single person in the country who wouldn't know who he was. His fame has been eclipsed by Monty in the years since. But
let's move on. The Orc. Claude Auchinleck, who is one of those characters who sort of he has his advocates, doesn't he? And he has his people who stick up for him. But his is one of those careers where basically ran out of road with Churchill, ran out of luck at the point at the war where generals aren't having much luck for all sorts of reasons. The Orc is one of those characters who very much sort of cops it as a result of various failings in Britain's ability to make a war stick. And is it him? Is it the kit? Is it the training? Is it the situation? Is it some weird strategic decisions by his bosses? And so on. But he's an interesting guy, isn't he? And again, he's another one of these people. Wellington College, Sandhurst, Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers, goes to India, learns Urdu and Punjabi. Another one, he's a great ability with his rapport with his Indian troops. He's born in 1884, so by the First World War, with the Indian Army, Northwest Frontier. He goes to Mesopotamia and other people we'll talk about are also present.
All around the Siege of Kut and all that. He's
exactly, all that stuff. Yeah. And, this is dismantling the Ottoman Empire. And, he's mentioned dispatches. He's a tremendous leader. He's got the DSO.
But he's Indian Army, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Because there is this thing, isn't there, that the way the British Army works is that they've sort of, if you're from east of Suez, you may come to North Africa and fight and command, but you may not. And you may as easily swap between them, whereas it's less likely that you'll go Northwest Europe to India. It's just a lot less likely. And Auchinleck falls into this category, doesn't he, of someone his centre of gravity is Suez, basically. He's in India in between the wars, and this is all this tribal coin, we'd call it now, counterinsurgency in Waziristan, frontier campaigns against tribal forces, which is all quite euphemistic, isn't it? Police actions. And then he's at Quetta, which is the staff college. People have differing opinions about Quetta, don't they? They say it's...
Yeah, they say it's sort of, it's colonial policing rather than kind of proper soldiering. I mean, the point is, but he then gets posted back because, by 1939, he's an incredibly experienced commander. He's a general and he commands 5th Division in Norway, which, Norway's a failure, but a bit of it does okay. And he's picked up because he knows Wavell already. He's picked up and becomes commander-in-chief after Wavell sacked in 1941 of the Middle East. But it is his misfortune, it's his bad luck that Middle East command at that time is absolutely vast and it's too big for one man. And that's a failure higher up the chain. Nonetheless, although he has a certain amount of success, it is he that authorises the Ghazala line, which is a terrible idea. This idea that you have a defensive line, which has an end but can be outflanked, rather than beefing up to Brooke, which had been, besieged unsuccessfully for 9 months the previous year. It's a mad decision. And he also puts Neil Ritchie in charge of 8th Army, which is a terrible decision. So his judgment is a bit dodgy.
And then steps in and commands 8th Army himself, comes down from the mountain.
As well as being Commander-in-Chief Middle East. Those who are for him say, Monty just inherited Auchinleck's plan. No, he didn't. Okay, so Auchinleck goes back to the Alamein line because that's the only conceivable line they could have taken at that particular point. He does a perfectly effective defensive battle where, air power massively contributes. But the plan for the Battle of Alamein, the second Battle of Alamein, the one that is the great victory of Montgomery and Alex, is not Auchinleck's plan. And he gets sacked because at the time that is what is required. He's run out of ideas, he's run out of steam, and it needs a fresh take. And he does pretty well in India subsequently. But
let's not forget Al Alamein that's the last stopper before Egypt falls. Basically, no one wants to be fighting from there. So the idea that Monty might have inherited the Orcs' plan, well, the Orcs' plan in that case is pretty desperate, isn't it? That you've ended up at the last place you can defend as a last resort, really.
Yeah, and he does. Subsequently, he gets sent to India and he becomes CNC of India. And he does a pretty good job there. He's very supportive of Slim, very supportive of Mountbatten. But that's in India and it's not in the West. Can he really be considered the best in the West? I don't think. Not a chance. Is my. He dies in Marrakesh. There are always rumours about him, but aged 96.
Well, let's do one last big one before the break in this Best of the West Duke special. And it does feel like this episode's front-loaded with some legends. And then, be honest, no one's going to vote for the Orc after that write-up.
Well, you can't vote, can you? No, people can if they want.
Well, if they want. General Sir Alan Brooke, also known as Alan Brooke, confusingly. He's Alan Brooke after night.
What was that?
I don't know. Would that be like calling yourself James Holland?
Lord James Holland.
Al Murray.
Merriman.
I should insist on being called Al Murray.
He was Al Murray and he became Al Murray.
He's not Alan Brooke until after the war. So, strictly speaking, throughout the war, he's
General Sir Alan Brooke.
Yeah, or just General Brooke. He again with another Ulster Irish, Anglo-Irishman, but Frenchified, which I think is very interesting. He grows up in France, doesn't he? Born in Bagnères de Bigorre, which I have been to. The spa town of Bagnères de Bigorre, where I once went.
Is that in the Hautes-Pyrénées?
Yes, it was the finish line for the Tour de France, but I went to watch Tour de France come powering into the town one afternoon. It's a little spa town, and there's very nice pork. Pork de Bigorre is a speciality. Black pigs of Bigorre.
What an amazing name. Yeah, pork de Bigorre.
But he's bilingual, isn't he? And again, he goes to Woolwich, not Sandhurst, which is the sort of people who can't afford Sandhurst place to study as an officer.
Mind you, he is an aristocrat. I mean, the son of Sir Victor Brooke Bart.
Well, but maybe they're broke. I mean, aristocrats, that doesn't necessarily
Well, he is
mean
broke
they've got
later
money.
on in life, isn't he? He's always broke.
Yeah, exactly. Then, of course, the First World War comes because he's born in 1883. So, he's exactly the right age for the First World War. He's with the Royal Horse Artillery. He's staff officer.
Liaison officer.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? So he's got to do a lot of that kind of handling of people, which becomes very much his great sort of skill later on, is dealing with people maybe with weird demands and so on. And he ends up, by the end of the war, he's a lieutenant colonel.
With a DSO and bar.
Yeah. So he's done all this and he's brave, but he's a gunner. And the thing, we've talked so much about how the Second World War, from the British point of view, is steel, not flesh, gunnery leading the way. Mm-hmm. Well, is it any coincidence that the man who ends up chief of the Imperial General Staff, the man who's absolutely shaping how the British are going to fight, is a gunner? I don't think so, right? It's no coincidence.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, that someone who understands, this is how we won the First World War,
Yeah. I mean, make no mistake, he's not just a pen pusher. He is a guy who is basically drawing up how we beat the Axis forces. Yeah. The steel, not flesh, it's basically coming from him at the very top. And he's got his acolytes who agree with him, like Monty or whatever, or people who are going to turn the line. But that's why Monty's there, because he's Brooke's man.
Yes, and his patronage matters enormously when he finally gets to the top. But he teaches, again, all of these people, they go through Camberley. Most of the generals we will talk about have taught there, been instructors there.
As well as the École Supérieure de Guerre.
Isn't that interesting?
In Paris, yeah.
And then he's at the War Office and all this sort of stuff. Commands up, again, gunnery at Aldershot Command. And it's about training and staff efficiency and all that. I mean, it sounds incredibly axiomatic. Surely that's what you ought to be doing, is it being, having an insistence on rigorous training, staff efficiency, march to combined arms operation. You'd think that would be, surely that's what everyone should be doing, but that's his reputation.
Corps commander in the BF in France, 1940, gets out, managed to withdraw okay. Then he's commander of Southern Command during the time of the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, which is about resisting invasion. And again, then he's Commander-in-Chief Home Forces, which is, again, a further development of that. Because the big topic, of course, after the Blitzkrieg is how do we fight tanks? How on earth do we do it? How do we beat the Panzers?
Yep.
There's all that discussion going on, and he's central to that.
Well, actually, he's a combined arms expert as well. I mean, he gets that package, which is so vital.
Yeah.
And then takes over as Chief of the Imperial General Staff in December 1941 when Dill is posted as ambassador to Washington. And
his job is to run the entire damn thing. I mean, it's quite extraordinary when you think about his responsibilities. And it's interesting, isn't it, that in an establishment where the Royal Navy has seniority, in essence, that it's a soldier that's in charge, that's Chief of Imperial General Staff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got a few administrators. We've already talked about Ronald Adam. How do you compare? I mean, I know he was a fighting general at the start of the war, but how do you compare someone like him and, say, Eisenhower to a fighting commander, corps commander, an army group commander? How do you compare them? And I think that's the difficult thing here, because, clearly he's a brilliant man. He's a brilliant general. Does that make him the best general in the West? He's almost kind of above theaters. I mean, he's best general in the war. I think the whole war. Maybe he's kind of more better considered to 3 years down the line when we've done the war in the Far East.
Yeah,
best generals, and then we've been through the worst generals. Then maybe we can go back to the overall best generals of the war. And
if you're trying to do apples and apples, it's him and Marshall, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Their contributions, both of them, are just absolutely incalculable. But as battlefield commanders, I'm not sure.
Well, we're going to take a break. That's the first four, which you tried to canter through, but you know what it's like on this podcast if you're a regular listener. Don't forget to go to the Patreon and vote. Let us know what you think. And even the people that we've missed out, because I know they're going to be people you think we've missed out. And we will see you very, very shortly after this break.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at Friskies.com or visit your local store.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, Best in the West, Episode 1. You know, we always try and resist top trumps, don't we, Jim? But here we are doing it for real.
You can't avoid it.
And we want you to vote, please, everybody, to let us know what you think. And so we can whittle it down. And then at We Have Ways Fest, which I'm sure you will all be attending. Please do. It's great fun for the weekend. And you can hear us duke it out to see who the best of the Duke generals is, which is what we're doing right now.
Then it'll all come together, won't it, for the best?
Yes, the best.
On Sunday morning.
Undisputed, crowned champion, World War champion of the world. Okay, right. Now, a nickname that maybe belies a man of steel. We're now talking about General Sir Miles Bimbo Dempsey. Big fan. And then another Irishman.
Yeah,
Captain
amazing,
Edward Dempsey and Annette Mary Dempsey. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it?
Mind you, he was born in Cheshire.
Yeah, in 1896, he's a bit younger than some of the people we've been talking about, sort of decade younger.
He is much younger, yeah.
Shrewsbury School.
And I think the big thing about Dempsey is that he cool cucumber. He totally unflappable. He doesn't get in a state.
Yes.
Fantastic temperament.
Yep.
And a nice sense of humour as well.
Yeah, well, and known for a sort of incredible ability with maps. Anyway, he First World War, goes to his regiment on the Western Front in 1916, Somme, Arras, Passchendaele, wounded twice, a military cross, and ends the war as a captain. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because that doesn't necessarily say how much further he might go after the war. And there's a whole load of people who are captains at the end of the First World War who must be thinking, well, if I'm going to stay in, what's my career really now?
I think he's one of the ones where you wouldn't expect this at all. You know, it's sort of like, who would expect in 1919 to go on and kind of be senior commander in 20 years' time? He's not going to be on your list for all his courage and all the rest of it.
Yeah, interestingly here, as he serves in the Irish War of Independence in Ireland. Then he goes to the Staff College at Camberley, which means, his card's marked. And then, this is a classic interwar British career, isn't it? Ireland, Staff College, Malta, India, gradually ticking his way up the rank to battalion command, gets his first battalion in 1938.
Alexander is a general, Brooke is a corps commander, he's a battalion commander.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And then he's with the BEF, the Royal Berkshire Regiment, 1st Battalion, and they fight back to Dunkirk. I mean, again, it's a similar story. But basically, he gets spotted, doesn't he, by the Brooke system.
Yeah.
And is a brigadier, 13th Infantry Brigade, and then he's sent to North Africa in 1942. And I think that's quite interesting that these obviously, because there's a lot of people who are battalion commanders in 1940, aren't there, who then end up in these roles. Horrocks, for instance, is a battalion commander, isn't he, in 1940? These people who get picked up, get noticed, get up the ladder faster.
He performs spectacularly well in France. That's the point. Bump up 2 ranks in the summer of 1940.
Yeah, it's going some, yeah.
Yeah, you're well on the way, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, particularly as there isn't the churn of people at that point of the war, being killed and needing to be replaced. So this is the sort of where they're reshuffling, aren't they? And picking their people. Again, it's this thing. He's known for meticulous training and emphasis on combined arms coordination. It's kind of like,
well, yeah, because you're not going to be still standing at the end of the war if you can't do that. That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. But it's how these things seem like truisms or axiomatic. Of course that's what he's. How else are you going to get on?
But he gets out to the Mediterranean. He gets out to North Africa. Does well commanding a division. And becomes out of nowhere, because there's been so many divisional commanders and corps commanders Lumsden, Norrie, people like this, who been and gone, Lease, all these guys, been and gone, got wounded, disappeared, got sacked, whatever. And then suddenly by the end of the Tunisian campaign, that's when you want to be peaking. You don't want to be peaking in 1941. You don't want to be peaking in the first half of 1942. You want to pick your moment. You want to be peaking when people are winning. And so suddenly he's plucked out of nowhere to command 13 Corps during Operation Husky. Why is he doing that? Because people like Horrocks have been wounded by this point quite badly, so he's out of the fray. There's another, potential Corps commander has gone. Lease has been moved across to 30 Corps.
Yep.
Anderson is sort of, he's been an army commander. He's not wanted anymore. So, he's sent back. So it's not like he's last man standing, but the next tier down, he's done enough to kind of make him stand out. And as I say, he's peaking at the right moment.
And Monty really, really rates him, really trusts him, and is one of those people he can ask him to do something, and he knows how he's going to do it, and he knows that they're completely simpatico in their method of war. I think it's PCA, Peter Cuddick Adams, who said, if you really want to look at how Monty does war, look at how Dempsey does war. It's him doing it. Monty's in his TAC HQ being collegiate or whatever. It's Dempsey's actually having to make the thing stick, particularly in Normandy. That's what he ends up doing. His second army, it takes the job in January 1944, and then it's him that's doing the British Canadian landings
all the way. And you have to say, British Second Army does a very, very, very good job in Northwest Europe from D-Day onwards. You can argue the toss about they didn't get to Caen, all the rest of it, but Second Army performs brilliantly. There's enough stick. There's enough kind of drive. You can never accuse Dempsey of being overly cautious, but he's also clearly an operational commander who's mindful of the lives of his men and does what he can, So he gets that balance, I think, absolutely spot on. I think, he's pretty good. And I think the British Army by the end of the Second World War are really tip-top.
Yeah, and Dempsey's one of these people who doesn't get credit, mainly because he's got, let's say, a flashy boss who likes the attention.
Yeah, he's also a good coalition warfare commander as well. Gets on with people, gets on with his American counterparts. He's very easygoing, but he's meticulous, and he doesn't suffer fools. And his very kind of affable impression kind of belies, backbone of steel, really. I mean, he's a very tough cookie, Dempsey. Pretty impressive, to be honest.
Okay, next, General Sir Richard Nelson Windy Gale.
Yeah.
Now,
okay, over to you then, Al.
Well, the reason Gale's in here is because we have over the years talked an awful lot about airborne warfare. And I think the interesting thing about airborne warfare is it's an absolute frontier. It's brand new. The British have grabbed it, and the Americans as well, in reaction to what the Germans achieved in 1940. They picked the brains of the Fallschirmjäger they've captured, blah, blah, blah. But there's one man on the British side of things who gets it, who understands it, and is the one guy who pulls off the landmark successful British airborne operation of the war, which is, after all, the Normandy landings, Op Tonga and all that sort of stuff. Windy Gale's a fascinating guy. He's Anglo-Australian, interestingly, born in 1896, grows up in Australia and New Zealand, comes back to England in 1906. So he's one of those sort of people that, these families who move around the empire, at that level. He's not particularly posh. He goes to King Edward VI School in Stratford-upon-Avon. So he's not, we've talked about a lot of posh people and a lot of baronets and sons of baronets and that sort of thing, haven't we? Gale isn't one of those people. The First World War, signs up. He's in the Worcestershire Regiment. He's in the Worcesters, but then he transfers to the Machine Gun Corps. There's a story he tells about, he thought he'd gone to something else, that he'd gone on a training course. He didn't realise he'd joined an actual new corps. But the Machine Gun Corps is one of these things where the British Army's trying to figure out how to reply to, or how to apply what the Germans are doing with machine guns themselves. So I think what's interesting about him in the First World War is that he's into innovation. He's into grasping new ways of doing things.
And wins an MC.
Yeah, he loses his nerve at one point. And, in his sort of summation of his career, there's a moment where he kind of says, I was worn out, I was done. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Between the wars, he's doing the same sort of thing where it's staff roles and keeping going. But Second World War, what's really interesting is Gale goes in and out of the War Office and Airborne Forces. He's there right from the start. He takes command of the 1st Parachute Brigade. So once they've stopped calling it Special Air Service, and it's him that's in the War Office fighting the Air Ministry tooth and nail to get this thing to work. It's him that decides what sort of people he wants. You've got Browning running top cover, doing all the sort of networking, but it's Gale in there writing the doctrine. It's Gale in there picking officers like John Frost, picking people like James Hill, picking the sort of absolute legends of the airborne fraternity, Alistair Pearce and those guys. But in 1943, he's appointed Major General, and this is when 6th Airborne Division's formed, whose task from its formation is to do the flanking operation that will cover the edge of the seaborne landing in Normandy. We've talked a lot about it, but what he figures out is how to make this work. He figures out how to make it work with a shortage of aircraft. He figures out that what he can do when he lands on the night of D-Day is nothing, right? That he's got to let his brigadiers and his battalion commanders and his company commanders and his squadron commanders and troop commanders and all the way down to the bottom, he's got to let them get on with it before he starts making big decisions. And then he fights this really, really horrendous battle at Breville, locking off the Allied left flank and stopping the Germans, taking the high ground, stopping the Germans being able to watch everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And, fights with what is basically an assault force, ends up fighting a proper infantry scrap, an under-resourced infantry scrap, and they fight with great vim and vigour. And I think Gale is the guy who does proof of concept of airborne operations, from raising battalions through to raising a division through to winning a battle. And they know how good he is, because immediately, once Normandy's over, he's taken out that job and he's given something more important to do, which is keep things going on the airborne side and run things properly.
From a British Second World War, he's a standard. He's the embodiment of the evolution of modern warfare, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
From the trenches of the First World War to pioneering airborne operations in the Second World War, so.
Exactly.
And he's a natural leader, isn't he? I mean, he's a terrific fellow. Absolutely terrific.
They talk about him turning up at briefings and going, I am the best in the bloody business and you ought to know it, all that sort of thing. And some people thought, oh, God, what's all this? And others thought, no, he actually is.
He actually is. So we got one more to do in this episode. He didn't originally make the list, actually. And then we suddenly thought, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
He's got to be in it, surely.
Because he doesn't make the list. So who we're talking about here is he's got some excellent middle names as well.
Yes.
It's General Sir Percy Hobart, whose middle names are Cleghorn Stanley Hobart. I mean, Foghorn Cleghorn here. And he's born in India, and he's an Indian Army brat. His dad's an Indian Army colonel. I think the most important thing to know about Hobart and Hobart's mindset is he's a Royal Engineer. He's a sapper. So he goes to Woolwich, and then he's a sapper, and he's a thinker. He's an intellectually curious guy, and then he's got this garlanded career with the sappers mainly in the Siege of Kut he's involved in as well.
Yes, he is, yes.
But he's fought at Mons, he's all over the place. And then after the war, joins the Royal Tank Corps in 1923, thinks, actually, this is the thing that I need to be headed towards. This is the coming warfare. I think that's really, really interesting, because he sniffs the wind and sees which way warfare's going to go. People will know about Hobart because of Hobart's funnies, that D-Day contribution. But actually, this is a guy who raises 7th Armoured Division, which is the Desert Force, or Desert Farce, as it's known when he takes it over in the Middle East. And he's been the inspector of the Royal Tank Corps. He's been writing doctrine. It's the infantry, tank and cruiser doctrine that comes from his thinking. It's him who's the biggest advocate for that. And some might say that's kind of like the sort of millstone around British armoured thinking's neck. That's his appraisal, is you need a heavy, slow tank for the infantry stuff, for the breakthrough, and then a cavalry tank for the breakout. That's doctrine that the British are still kind of digesting until the very end of the war, when they end up with a main battle tank,
But then he has this slight hiatus, doesn't he? It's bizarre. Having sort of, done all this training, having been this great advocate of armoured warfare, having created the 7th Armoured Division, he then gets recalled, removed from command, placed on the retired list. And this is largely because of disputes over doctrine and his abrasive style. But it's also for infidelity, isn't it?
Well, yes, but so basically when he's teaching at Quetta, and the thing about the Quetta Staff College is everyone knows it's a place where people go and have affairs, and there's lots of shagging going on. It's renowned for it. But what he does is he has an affair with the wife of one of his students, one of the officers at the college, and then they get married. And the War Office actually issue a memo saying anyone that does that ought to resign their commission. And he doesn't resign his commission. So he's got all his intellectual rigour and his approach to developing new doctrine and embracing modern warfare. He's got this black mark on him that he's basically a rotter. He's a home wrecker or something, right?
Yeah.
In the Middle East, Wavell's wife doesn't like this and really doesn't like Hobart, and that causes him big problems in the pre-war period, where basically he's shuttled off there to get him out of London.
Well, yeah, he goes back, retired from the army. He's done in 1941. So he then joins the Home Guard as a Lance Corporal.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Churchill goes, hang on a minute, what about this Hobart bloke I've heard of? Oh, he's a Lance Corporal of the Home Guard now, sir. So he's brought back, they have these things called tank parliaments. Churchill gets together with industrialists and Brooke and people like Hobart, and they talk about what they should do for armoured warfare and sort of argue it all out there with Churchill trying to sort of move it along. And then he's appointed to train 11th Armoured. So the 7th Armoured and 11th Armoured Division, I think two of the sort of most famous armoured divisions of the Second World War in the British Army. He raised. The gerbil is the 7th Armoured from the desert years, the Desert Rats. So it's a pet that one of the officers had. And then the bull is Hobart's family crest. And then, they think he's too old to command it. And they don't trust him because he's a shagger, blotted his copybook. So he's not allowed to command 11th Armoured. He's seen as old and done. And then finally, Brooke says, actually, you know what? We'll raise 79th Armoured. We need a specialised armoured assault force. And this is the thing Hobart's known for. But the thing is he has invented armoured doctrine anyway and then reinvents it all over again.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about 79th Armoured is they are the largest tank force in the world at the end of the Second World War, but they never fight as a division. They're never seen as that. They have something like 4,000 vehicles at the end of the war, something like that. But it's all devolved. Everyone's trained to just turn up and go, what do you need me to do? You know, and a request will go in for some crocodiles or some flails or some, you know, avries and all this sort of stuff, bridge layers, all this sort of stuff. And it's all devolved. So 79th Armoured Division, you know, if you read the Black Hawk reports, they are literally everywhere, but not as a division.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
He's absolutely incredible. And he keeps track of all this, runs all this. And, you know, I think he's crucial to the Allied victory in Northwest Europe in 1944-45.
Yeah, he's a visionary, isn't he? He's a visionary, brilliant man, you know, creative, thinking outside the box. I mean, you need these people.
Yeah, really good at when he has to go to a cavalry regiment and go, by the way, chaps, you're not going to be swanning, you're going to be flailing, or you're going to be punching holes in the seawall. He's able to persuade them that that's actually what they want to do and that they're going to be important. Because it's a difficult task, that. Getting the cavalry people to think again about what their actual role will be isn't easy.
He's considered 20 years ahead of his time, isn't he? I mean, I
think easily. Yeah. So,
the first 7.
So, Adam, Alex, the Orc, Brooke, Dempsey, Gale, Hobart. That's the chaps we've done today. In our next episode, we'll be working our way through the next set of Duke generals before we then advance onto our noble allies, the United States of America. So we'll see you for our next episode. And of course, if you become a patron or go to our Apple Officer Class channel, you can listen to this without ads and all in one delicious load of Best in the West generals. But most importantly, go to the Patreon and vote.
Yes. Make sure you vote, people. Alexander.
Except Monty. Anyway, we will see you next time. Thanks very much. Cheerio.
Cheerio.